I was thinking like, why it is that I felt the need to compete and go all over the world and, and, I don't think that like I no longer think like I'm going to change people's minds, right? Like, I think there's most of the world is seeing that, competition is a good thing, but I'm thinking like there might be some people that could listen to the podcast or listen to the story that are on the fence, like they're being influenced to compete, or they're being influenced to kind of violate something that they think they disagree with, like. And so that's kind of like what I'm after here. But um, I wanted to tell the story about how in 1994, I believe, or 1995, that I was part of the first group of karate competitors to go to the Olympic Training Center and compete for the first Olympic sanctioned Pan American competition. So karate was being introduced into the Pan American Olympic Games as a kind of precursor for its acceptance in the Olympics, the full-fledged Olympics. And so I was national champion of two organizations, and everybody in those days was talking about like, and they're actually talking a lot about it now, because I think the Olympics are in Japan, and they're having karate be a demonstration sport, and then after that it'll get fully recognized as being an Olympic sport. But in those days they were talking a lot about it. It was like something that the competitors of that generation were really hopeful for. And so there was a lot of like charge around this tournament. And I remember going there, and in like during in 93, I won every major karate tournament in this country. And, I went to the world championships, and, I was North American champion, and I was the captain of the U.S. karate team. I was the captain of the New York team that won, nationals and regionals and a lot of events. And so there was another guy that was kind of coming up parallel to me in the AAU governing body, and his name is Perry Prince. And there was a lot of talk about how him and I should fight. Like, that would be like the fight, right? Like, we were the two heavyweights. Like, there were three sanctioning bodies that were coming together, and I was national champion of two of them. I was the current heavyweight champion of two of them, and he was AAU national champion. So, there was a lot of buzz around the event, but then there was like this further charge around us coming together and fighting, and like I remember seeing him in the cafeteria, and like for anyone who's been to the Olympic Training Center, that's like the big deal is that cafeteria. They've got everything. Like they really feed the athletes well. But so, like we kind of gave each other the nod, and I was like, "Oh, you're Perry Prince. I'm Gene Dunn." Da da da. And so tournament day comes, and we're coming up the brackets, and we meet, I think, in the third round, and they're letting a lot of contact really go. They're like, the tournament is like kind of getting wild, if you will. And so him and I are competing against each other, and we're going kind of point for point. And I think I don't know who's winning, but Perry like does this kind of like jump spinning hook kick and hits me on the back of the head. And like, as I'm coming forward, we clash and fall, and he breaks his neck and is, paralyzed to this day. He's, I think, a quadriplegic. He was, all four limbs. And, like, I remember like getting up and him like screaming on the floor, like he can't move. He's screaming, he can't move. And he's saying, I don't want to fight anymore. I don't want to fight anymore. I don't want to fight anymore. And they carry him out. And, you know, I was a rough guy. Like I was, you know, I was dealing with a lot, and really like I played up, not unlike some competitors these days, this kind of role, you know. Um, and you know, I remember everyone in the tournament kind of looking at me in like disgust. Like for sure I did not do anything purposely. That's not what I'm saying. But you know, it was like, you know, I was a part of something now forever that was like pretty bad, really bad. And so like I remember thinking to myself, you know, F that guy. Like he got what he deserved. Like he was trying to hurt me. And, you know, like I remember like coming back home, and it was really like, it was just a very, very dark, dark time for me. And thinking like, I was talking to some of the people that I was training with, and you know, they were full contact people, and they were like, how do you feel about it? And I was like, man, I don't really care. And you know, like they were like, you don't need to feel any way about it. And you know, I had kind of like tried to reach out to him in the very early days, like during that time, like Christmas and a few holidays, and like his family was like, this guy doesn't want to talk to you. Like, don't call back. You're not welcome here. And you know, it took me like a year or two to realize like who I was being. Like I was like, I had lost like all sense of my humanity in like this pursuit of winning. And you know, like I like got struck by like, oh my gosh, like who, wait, that's not who I want to be. Like that's not who I am inside. Like, and so I started to like kind of think about a lot, you know, like the track of this. How did this happen, and what got me into it? You know, like looking back and like being so insecure and so, you know, like I didn't have a father figure. I grew up in New York alone, and I didn't really have any idea about manhood. And I thought like, you know, that would be one way to establish my manhood and my reputation and all of this stuff that like, you know, it's kind of ridiculous. But, you know, like when you're 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, it's very important, 25, even 30 sometimes. And so, you know, and then I realized that I let myself be kind of maneuvered and positioned by not every one of my instructors, but some of my instructors, I think were pushing me forward because it served their ego. Like if I was winning, it was good for the dojo. And if I was winning, like they had a good reputation, good name, and all this stuff. And like I I just started to look at like, why did I do this? You know, friend, like I can remember thinking like before this ever happened, like why compete? Like this is insane. Like I'm putting myself in this position for what? Like to prove what? And I'm looking for approval from people that, you know, are not even people I really like all that much. And so, you know, I made this decision after that. I competed one more time after that. And that was at a full contact Kung Fu, the first world Kung Fu full contact tournament in Seattle with Mr. Vizio. And after that, like, I was just like, I'm done. Like, I don't want to like do this anymore. And, you know, like I was thinking that competition fundamentally, like you've got to look like if you want to win, right? If it's not just like an experience for you, a one and done experience, but if you're like in this like mechanism of wanting to win, like you have to see yourself better than another person. You have to see yourself above them. And I think fundamentally that got me in real trouble. Like I wasn't able to empathize or kind of understand that like I had feelings, but so did other people. Like, like, uh, and so really, I think it perpetuated a lot of real, like, a long cycle of negativity that was very, very difficult to get out of. And I just wanted to like encourage people, like, if you don't want to compete, whether that's martial arts or anything else, like, you don't got to, like look at why you need acceptance or want approval in this way from the people around you or your coaches or your, I don't know, your professors or anything else. Like, what's driving that? And what's driving them to have you compete? Like, is it their ego and that you, like, are you okay being a kind of pawn in that game? Um, and like it's okay to say like, nah, like that's not for me. Like I don't need to be better than someone else in order to feel worthy. Like I can find that out, in the practice or in these other ways. And you don't need to fall prey to it all. Like,
Do you think that that's one of those pivotal moments that set you in a trajectory of where
yeah.
your philosophy and your thought of martial arts is now and life in general?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to tell the story on the podcast so that people can have some context, like the thing that I'm left with is like the loss of like my humanity. Like I think in some ways it was so intense that like I kind of shut off because like to really understand the impact of that, like another human being that I was engaged in a fight with is, in a competition with, not a fight, but in a competition, like is paralyzed for life. And so like to really like grasp that in that moment, like was overwhelming.
Were you
But like I have to
ever
leave.
able to have a conversation?
Oh yeah, I've actually had many conversations with him after that. And it took like, this happened in 1995. So what is that, 25 years ago, right? So it took, I think, 15 years for us to kind of reconcile, and to talk, and he's a lovely man, and he's like, I didn't ask for his forgiveness because I didn't, from my perspective, I didn't do anything wrong. Like I wasn't intentionally trying to hurt him. We were going very, very rough, but not like that. Not like for someone to get injured, but like trying to win, trying to dominate.
Do you
But
think
like,
that in that setting, because it was starting to get a little aggressive and it was also this thing to present that it should be something for the Olympics, that
yep,
you were both kind of being put on display for this thing that wasn't really about either of you?
there was part of that there. That's why I was saying like a pawn in the ego of these people, of other people's games. Like, like there's something to look at if you're a competitor from that perspective. Um, and again, like if you know that you're a competitor and there's like, I'm not trying to change anybody's mind anymore. Like I'm done with that. But like people who are like, no, wait, I don't really like this. Like, whether that's your dad or your mom pushing you to compete, or if that's your coach, like you don't got to. Like it doesn't mean that you're more or less than anybody else. the thing that was the worst for me, Ephraim, was like knowing that like I was like, F that dude. Like, like it could have happened to me. Like that, like I actually said those things to other people, like is terrible for me. Like it's like something like I was like, wait, wait, who am I? What is that person? And so
What do you think triggered that question? Because there's obviously a permeating philosophy for some people that they get into that hyper competitive, I guess you could even say toxic competitive mindset. And then instead of the impulse being that question, it was to kind of dig your heels in deeper to that thing for a little bit. What do you think? Was there a moment where it hit you? Then the question started to come of like, why am I doing this?
I think one of the reasons like I was doing it was to kind of prove to myself that I had like courage, like I could face another man in that way and overcome my fears. And I while I think that that had some merit, um, I I realized that like the fear is really driving the show on this whole thing. And deep down inside, like I I've always like wanted to be a good person. Like I always wanted to do some good in the world and have good experiences. Just, you know, I think that, that was like an operating concept back in there. But like I because of like the way I grew up, the way you grow up, like sometimes it's very difficult to see like what you're actually doing, right? There's what you think you're doing, what you think you want to be doing, but then like you realize you're kind of like, I don't know what, like you find yourself holding a gun in a bank, sticking somebody up. Like it's like you're like, wait, how did I get here?
Was that a
And
moment
so,
that kind of stopped the momentum, you think, of all that stuff? Like there was a momentum happening of that mindset,
yeah,
and that
yeah,
that moment was probably a put the brakes on that.
yeah, yeah. And it made it like it took some time, but like I realized that like I was just like I was violating something that I knew was not correct for me for all of these other reasons: approval, um, uh, proving something to myself, reputation, all this stuff. Like, and ultimately, I think it got me in a very bad place. It wasn't worth it. It really recently we cleaned out the basement of the dojo, right? During this whole shutdown, we like cleaned everything out. And I don't know, you were there, you saw a lot of the junk, but like I like had hundreds of trophies and medals and that were in boxes, and they went from boxes to bags and into the garbage. It was like it was none of it was worth that experience in that way. Like if I would take it all back if he could, if that experience never happened to him, I would give it all away. But also none of it matches the experience of loving and 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 helping people sort of realize more of their true power without that external validation, without this kind of like empty thing, you know. And I know a lot of guys make and girls make money from it. Like there are pro athletes and there are guys doing videos and girls doing videos and all that. But like for some of us, I don't think that's the right way to go. And again, like I want to say it again, like if it's not right for you, don't do it. And I don't think, by the way, it's just for young people. I think a lot of like, you know, mature people still like fancy themselves as like having to compete with another person or they're not relevant and all this stuff. And it's just not so. Just not so.